Welcome to The Leading Edge, leadership lessons to help you bring your mission to life. Here's Mindy Audlin and Stacy Collins.
What are the key ingredients that bring your mission to life? What are the three things your people should know or learn in order for you to successfully accomplish your mission? I'm Mindy Audlin.
And I am Stacy Collins.
Yes, in this episode of The Leading Edge, we are discussing the three pillars of a mission-driven organization and how to do more by actually doing less.
Well, I love the sound of that. and I'll be sharing my experience as the small group program leader at Unity of Houston and fill you in on how we've been using small groups to grow and connect our community.
Yes. Now I have to issue a little bit of a warning for this episode.
Uh-oh.
I know. Brace yourself. It's going to be counter to what some people in your organization may be wanting you to do. So this week is an exercise in focus. Focus. So I encourage you, subscribe to the show and listen to all the episodes because they really build on each other. It really, everything grows together and we're just having an amazing journey with you. I also would invite you to share this online, share it with your teams, share it with your leaders. It will help you build a case for streamlining your offerings and creating a strong, healthy organization. Sometimes you just need to hear it from somebody else, right?
That's right.
That's what Stacy and I are here to do for you. We're here to be the voice of experience and just an outside perspective that will hopefully give you the I don't know, the fodder to be able to bring to your group and really be able to discuss what are the things that matter most. Before we get to that, though, last week, Stacy, we had such a great time talking about engaging newcomers. So I'm wondering, did it spawn some new ideas? Stacy, what have you been reflecting on since our last episode?
Well, one of the things I've been reflecting on is putting ourselves in the place of those newcomers. What is it like to visit your church for the first time? And one of the other key takeaways was the idea of a digital visitor card, electronic visitor card, with all of our services being online. Maybe if they're in person, they're still doing an online version. Have that online visitor card, get that contact information, and put the link to it in the description of your talk. That way people, whenever they're watching their talk, they can connect with you.
I love it. Great ideas, very, very practical ideas as well. The thing that I kind of walked away with is, and this is just reiterating this point because I think it's so important, is that when you have a membership-driven organization, which as churches, ministries, that's what most of us have, the number one thing that causes people to leave, it's for some of us, it's counterintuitive, but the number one thing that causes someone to leave a membership is not that there's not enough stuff going on. Usually it's that there's too much stuff going on and it feels like we're missing out. It feels like I can't possibly do it all. That the number one reason people leave a membership is actually because of overwhelm. So if you're one of those, or maybe you've got board members or you've got staff or you've got people in your congregation who are saying, we need to grow, we need to offer more things because we need to offer something for everybody. Let me tell you from my own personal history, that is a recipe for disaster and overwhelm for your staff. You definitely don't want your team to be overwhelmed. And really, honestly, you don't want your newcomers to be overwhelmed either. And that leads us into the topic for this episode, the idea of the big three. So just to set some context, I want to share with you, I've been reading some business entrepreneurial types of blogs and articles and YouTube channels and all types of things related to membership, related to how do you grow an organization? How do you scale an organization? And here's something that I saw just this morning that fits so well with our theme today. And the quote was this: sometimes you have to make choices that disappoint some so that you may better serve others. Oh, and I'm going to say it again just to kind of let you breathe into it,
Yeah.
because I know for some of us, this is really, really tough. Sometimes you have to make choices that disappoint some so that you may better serve others. So, Stacy, what do you want to add as we kind of head into this week of focusing?
Yes, I love that. And I could feel it land too, because the last thing we want to do, especially at Unity, where we come one, come all, is to disappoint people, right?
Right.
But I know that it is it is a lesson in futility to try to customize every program to meet every single person's needs, and to just keep adding more to the calendar is not the answer. It's certainly not. But to let people to have a structure, such as a small group structure, which I'm going to go into, that is customizable within each group to meet the needs of the people. But to try to over program, oh, it's an exercise of futility, as I said.
It really is. And it's exhausting. It is
Yes.
exhausting. And it feels like you're doing someone a service because you're putting together. And I will speak from my own experience. I have been the one who someone comes and says, "Oh my gosh, Mindy, this thing you did was so great. Let's do it again." Or, "Oh, you know what? We should do more outreach, or we should do more this." And so I'm like, "Really? You want to? You want to? Let's do it. Let's do it." And so I go out of my way to create this thing that's going to be, so amazing that everybody seems like they say they want. And then when it actually rolls out, there's not many people that actually participate. And what really gets me is so many times the person who is the one who's like, "Oh, you have to do this, you have to do this," is not even there when I teach the class.
Right.
So I've had those experiences. Maybe you have too, where you go out of your way to please others, and then in the end, it ends up just being something else that took your time away from what really is most important. So I don't, have you been there too, Stacey?
Yes, and we've had some great experiences recently. It used to be every time we taught a class, one of the ministers, they teach amazing classes, they do amazing workshops, and people would say, "Oh, it was perfect, but if only we could keep going, if only you could schedule another one." And the same thing that you just described would happen is, okay, we'd work, squeeze it in the calendar somewhere, make it happen, and then where were these people? And
Right.
so over the last couple of years, we've had that experience when we'd have like our SE in the field online or something, and we would say, "We'd love for you to stay together. Would you like to join a spirit group together?"
Yes.
And some of them say yes, and some of them say, "Oh, actually, we're kind of busy." But then either way, it works out beautifully, just as it needs to, right?
Right. It's not you taking on all the work of putting it together. It empowers them. And the beautiful thing about that is not only are you able to focus your time, because there is an opportunity cost to chasing those butterflies, seeing
Right.
the shiny squirrel. It is a
Oh,
shiny squirrel,
yes.
by the way. This squirrel does shine. We see those shiny things out there, and there is an opportunity cost to that, because that time that we use trying to find that thing that's going to make people happy, if we use that time to really build the foundation, now we have a healthier organization. We don't feel depleted and exhausted and overwhelmed. So this article that I was reading is really interesting, and this again was a business article, but it was so appropriate, I thought, for what I have seen, particularly in New Thought ministry, New Thought organizations, but any kind of mission-centric organization, really. And here's what it said. One of the quotes was, "Too much choice creates friction for your customers." And I would say I've been in churches where the bulletin has 30 pages of events coming up, and that actually creates friction for your newcomers. That it's not like people look at that and say, "Oh, wow, look at all the things we could do." They're like, "Wow, I can't possibly do all of that, so I don't really look at doing any of that," which sometimes seems counterintuitive. We're like, do more. But really, the opposite is true. So here's what this article says: too much choice creates friction, and it can reflect two things: a business, or in our case, an organization, that one, doesn't know their customers that well. Like, we don't really know what they want. So we're just throwing spaghetti at the refrigerator to see what sticks. And two, an organization that wants to be everything to everyone. And while we do want to be everything to everyone, there's a part of us that knows that that is an impossible thing to create. And
Yes.
if we are on that quest, it's going to be a really messy journey. Yeah, it's going to be a difficult journey, because it's just not possible. So, do you recognize falling into either of those categories, or have you found that your small groups have helped you in any of those areas?
Yes, for sure. And I just want, if anybody else, if this resonates with you, I think it was our first episode, Mindy, when you talked about the importance of mission. And if you get really clear on your mission statement, that will really help with some of this, these almost like demands. Sometimes they're sweet demands for different things, and sometimes they're internal because you want, how can we get more people? How can we appeal to, and you don't know what you're doing. It's like you said, you're kind of trying everything, throwing spaghetti at the wall. Meanwhile, your volunteers are starting to get burned out. You've got five things competing with each other on a Sunday. I've been there where that's the case, where we've had so much programming that it becomes it becomes difficult because people feel pulled in many different directions.
Right.
And so I think that, like we're talking about with the small groups, build that structure in, and it can meet the needs of many of these things that are groups that you have 12 groups. You can shrink them down into a small group program, a really well developed small group program.
Yes, and that's actually what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about what exactly are the three pillars of a mission-centric organization. And then if you find that you have been throwing spaghetti at the wall for a long, long time and that your ministry is essentially a spaghetti-covered wall, things that have stuck, even if they're not sticking in a particularly strong, healthy way, there's just spaghetti everywhere. How do you rein that in? How do you create that kind of culture shift? And I've seen it happen, especially when sometimes those people who are disappointed are your biggest donors or your strongest leaders. It can be difficult to say, hey, we need to do what's best for this organization, even though I know, you like this kind of music and we're going this direction with the music. It's, like those types of decisions, to be able to know, like you said, Stacy, what the mission is, what you're trying to create, and then to make some decisions about what is in the best interest of the entire organization. So the case study that I saw, it was actually two case studies. One of them was like Reese's peanut butter cups. Don't you love those?
I'm interested already.
Favorite. Those are my favorite. And they talked about how Reese's, you get the little candy cups, and like each cup has a little peanut butter cup in it, and it comes like two per package. And so Reese's, was very successful with that because obviously it is like the best chocolate ever. Like that's my favorite, peanut butter and chocolate. So what happened was people were like, this is so good. We want more cups. We need 4 cups to package. So then they make the Reese's Grand, and they make the huge thing. And then it's like, oh, but no, really, I just need like the one gigantor cup, for that day, when it's just like, I need one giant Reese's peanut butter cup. And so they started making the single king size, they have the king size pack, they have the monster Reese's pie. And then it's like, oh, we want the Reese's peanut butter cups to be more like M&Ms. And so we have the Reese's Pieces that taste like Reese's, but they look like M&Ms. And then it's like, okay, but no, we want to put the Reese's Pieces in. So anyway, it just became this machine of like, everybody would have an idea, and so they would go create that, and they would go create that, and next thing you know, we've got Reese's peanut butter, all these different products, but the product line was not as successful. So the other case study that it showed was actually Apple. And in the days when Steve Jobs had to come back in and take the reins back in, Apple was creating hundreds and hundreds of products because the retailers were saying, oh, we like this, we want you to create that. We like this, we want you to create that. And they were trying to make those retailers happy by creating all these products. And it was taking down this ginormous, successful organization. I mean, think about how large of an organization, how successful that organization was, and yet it was getting bogged down by trying to be everything to everyone, trying to fulfill everybody's request and make everybody happy. So when Steve Jobs came back in as their interim CEO, he came in and he said, we got to stop doing this. And he eliminated 70% of their products. So this video that I watched, and I'll put it in the SpiritGroups Facebook page. So facebook.com/SpiritGroups. So you can see it if you want to. It is a business example, but he came in and he said, we're going to eliminate 70% of our products. And had he not done that, some of the experts said that Apple was within about 90 days of going bankrupt. It was that big of a burden supporting all these different products. So what did they do? They came down, they boiled it down to what is most important. What is our core offering? What is our core product line? And that's what we're doing today, is to really stop the crazy madness of trying to do, I've been to churches where there's concerts and there's theater and there's speaker series and there's groups and there's groups and there's groups and there's Sunday and there's Sunday afternoon. And I mean, there's just like so much stuff going on that it is incredibly overwhelming. If you had to today say, there are 3 classes that you can teach, there are 3 things that you can teach your members, what would those 3 things be? If you couldn't teach anything else, you couldn't teach, the Buddhism or the Hinduism or the, sacred chanting or whatever. If you could only teach 3 things, what would those 3 be? So I'm just gonna give you a awkward moment of silence.
I was going to say, I could feel my own palms getting sweaty there, but
Really?
sure we've got some
I love it. Yeah, it is. It's like, wow, if I really had to get that focused, if it came down to I could teach 3 things. So I'm going to share with you what I have found in working with hundreds of mission-centric organizations, lots and lots of New Thought churches. These are the things that I find are typically the foundational pieces to what does it take to build a healthy organization. So number 1, and I would say all of these tie into your membership, because your membership is that's who you serve. That's who you are, is your membership. So the first thing the first pillar would be participation. And by participation, what I mean is, what are the core teachings? What are the foundational teachings that a member should know in order to fully represent your membership? Right? So if you should be able to go to any one of your members, and for example, in Unity, they should all know the 5 principles, right? Because that's core to who we are, what we teach. So helping people understand those principles, that should be like one of the primary things that we get, because that's their personal growth. That's the mission fulfilled in us first. So that's participation. And that can be delivered through your Sunday service, right? You can teach that through your Sunday service. That can be delivered through your small groups. You've got content that's being taught to people through your small groups. So participation can be saying, hey, if you're going to be a member, then what membership means is you come on Sunday, or you come to a small group, or maybe you do both. But being a member means you're participating in this because it's important for you to learn these core teachings. And then it's important that in those Sunday services or in those small groups that you have opportunities for people to actually learn those things. So that is what I would call participation, engaging in your services. And we talked about this a while back when we talked about, giving people options, virtual church, local church, small groups, all great options where you can deliver this kind of content. So that's the first pillar, is participation. Second pillar is going to be giving. Obviously, you can't operate an organization, any kind of organization, without having an inflow of financial resources. So what is your teaching around how does that flow? And we had a great, oh my gosh, when Karen Tudor was here, go back to that episode if you want to hear about money mindset in a missions-driven ministry. That was an amazing episode. So what is your program for educating people on your prosperity teachings? And then from those teachings to be able to encourage them, to ask them, to model for them what it would be like to be contributors or tithers, depending on what you want to communicate, who your mission is, what are you about. So that's the second pillar, is giving, teaching people what does it mean to give in a mission-centric organization. And the third pillar is serving. So having your volunteers, having the people who are rolling up their sleeves and saying, I'm not just going to come on Sunday and tap my foot along to the music. I'm going to be here on Saturday to help pull the weeds. And I'm going to be here Sunday after church to clean up the kitchen. So that's part of building a nonprofit church ministry. That's part of building it, is we need those volunteers. And the truth is, it's not even about us needing the volunteers. It's that as members, as growing leaders, we need to be in service. Like, members need to be in service in order to really thrive and grow. That's part of our engagement as well. So if you engage in learning, engage in giving financially, engage in giving of your time and your talents, you have those legs on the stool, you've got an organization. You've got what it takes to create a healthy ministry. So when we talked about a few weeks back, We talked about engagement strategy and laid out the big picture of that. We talked about how there's the explorers. We did a whole episode on the explorers and how do you reach them. We talked about engaging those explorers. So we've talked about your newcomers. This week is really about going into the next half of the cycle, which is expand and then express and then encourage. So this is really about expanding people's knowledge around what are our beliefs? What are our teachings? How do you participate? How do you give? How do you contribute? How do you serve? So this is the expand mode of that engagement strategy. So here's the question that we'll be talking about today, which is how do you do that? How do you rein it in when you've got hundreds of things that are happening? How do you restructure them into one simple, cohesive system? So we're going to be doing a little bit of how-to in this episode. And if you have any questions, please feel free to call in and let us know, what you're doing in your ministry, if you have some ideas that you think would be helpful to share, or if you have any questions on how do you do this. Our studio lines are open, right?
Yes, they sure are. And you can give us a call at 816-251-3555.
Now, you know that with every single one of these, this Q&A that I have here, you know that I'm going to talk about small groups and how,
Yes.
and Stacy will too, and how you can use your small groups because you're going to see, like, this is why I just cannot get off the small group bandwagon, because everything that, typically the changes that I see in organizations, like small groups are the way to do it. Small groups are the way to do it. So we'll talk about that. So let's dive in to some of these frequently asked questions. Number one is, okay, let's say you already have, I get this all the time. Oh, we already do small groups. We've got a Course in Miracles group. We've got a yoga group. We've got a group that does this, a group that men's group and a women's group, and we've got all these groups. So, do we need to do small group ministry or spirit groups, like a spirit groups type of program, if we already have lots and lots of groups meeting? So what are your thoughts, Stacy?
Well, of course, I'm going to say, of course you need a small groups program. It's because that the way that the small groups program, when you structure it so that, and for example, spirit groups is a great example, and you have spiritual disciplines. These aren't just social groups, or they're not just classes. They're not just one thing. They can actually engage people in that service, engage people to want to participate in the church, to develop their own spiritual growth. So there's components to the small group. They could still do A Course in Miracles in a small group format, and add to the richness and depth and participation level in it.
Yes. And I love that sense of looking at the groups that you already have and saying, a small group ministry program, what's beautiful about it is so many things. But one of the things that I love is that when it's time, like right now, it's time. Sign up for groups. It's fall, people. This is your week. Sign up. So it's a very big week for those of you doing small group ministry. And the nice thing about that is I have one call to action. Find your small group. That is the only thing that I'm saying. I don't have a bulletin full of, here's our once a month men's group, and here's our bi-weekly women's group, and here's this and that and this and that. I don't have to spend 5 minutes, 10 minutes of announcements. I have seen it, 10 minutes of announcements on all the different things going on. I've also seen churches where they have a Course in Miracles group that meets. And I've done this where I've gone and when we've started doing spirit groups in a community, where I go to all the leaders of all the other groups and I invite them to a small group ministry training with the intent of, is your group something that we could bring into this umbrella? Like, what would it take to bring your group into this umbrella so that when we are promoting our small groups, that we are promoting your group? And what it takes is those groups have to first and foremost be aligned with the mission of the organization. For most of them, it's just a matter of adding a social event and a service project, honestly. For most of the groups that I've worked with, it's maybe going to weekly instead of monthly, but for most of them, it's a pretty small change. But I have had people push back and they're like, oh, no. I literally had somebody tell me once, this was a Course in Miracles group, that I don't want to align it with unity because I don't want to confuse people with unity terminology. And I'm thinking, well, then why is that Unity Church promoting your group every Sunday? It isn't supporting the mission of the church. That's one thing to offer space, which is, a wonderful thing to do, but that doesn't mean you have to put it in the bulletin. It doesn't mean you have to announce it on Sunday. You can offer your building and rent it out and make it available to all kinds of things, but that doesn't mean that those things are part of your mission that we need to be promoting. And I've seen people that are like, yeah, I want to do it at the church because the church will get the people there. But if it's not part of the mission, then you're just distracting people. There's so much distraction, and we're just adding to it by saying, here's all the things that are going on. And I think it comes from that sense of, we need to do more. We need to have more offerings.
Yes.
We want to do so much. So that's one way to do it, is to just talk to the leaders that you have and invite them in. So any thoughts on that, Stacy? Have you had that experience?
Yes. And it's I spoke on this but a little bit before we got started today, but just even when you have groups, like for example, our choir, we have a large choir. They haven't been able to meet in person this year, and they were really hoping to be able to have rehearsals in person this fall. And since they're not able to do so, the music director recognized that one of the purposes of the rehearsals, yes, to be so they would sound amazing on Sundays, which they did, but was for connection. And so now we have spirit groups, so that make that connection possible. So that's just one wonderful way I've seen.
I love it. So we'll go deeper into that and give you some more Q&A, some more ideas when we come back in just a moment on The Leading Edge.